Hello once again, my name is Nick Pell and this is my choice for the top 10 games of 2019. Now, I don't really do a lot of gaming videos on this channel, but I do play a fair amount of games each year. So I felt compelled to do a best video games list for 2019 along with the other lists to come in the following weeks. A couple things to note. This is mainly a list of games which I personally enjoyed and I have finished all of them. I did not consider any games which I haven't beaten for this list, so the likes of Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, and Death Stranding are not in the running for this. Also, nothing which is exclusive to the Xbox One or the Nintendo Switch are considered either, since I don't have regular access to either system. So in other words, I suppose this is more of a best PS4 games of 2019 list more than anything. But regardless, let's begin. Now coming in as the worst of the best is The Sinking City. This Lovecraftian game finds its protagonist Charles Reed investigating mysterious occurrences in Oakmont, Massachusetts during the 1920s. This game certainly felt unique with its gameplay style, not giving players any real hints about the detective cases or anything really going on in regards to missions. It made the detective work feel genuine, if not a little frustrating at times, and its narrative was intriguing enough that I was engaged the majority of the time I was playing it. It's not the best game of 2019 by far, but of what I played this year, it was good enough to make it one of the most memorable ones for sure. Next up is Devil May Cry 5. My first real venture into the DMC franchise was with the reboot a few years back, and I quite enjoyed it. But with this return to form, the series continues the story of Dante and Nero while introducing new character V as they band together to stop a new Demon King. The gameplay is the real draw here. Each character has a unique set of moves which are a joy to learn, and getting to know them throughout the story made me want to go back and experience the story as a whole essence from the beginning. The game does get unforgivingly hard on higher difficulties though, which cut down some of the replayability for me. But I still had a very fun ride, and this is one of the better ones this year, in my opinion. At number 8 is The Outer Worlds. Now, full disclosure, I've never beaten a Fallout game. They just never really clicked for me, so there were times playing this because it's from the same development team which made Fallout New Vegas, so very similar gameplay styles. There were times playing this when I kind of did have to force myself to keep going just because this gameplay style is not something which I get latched onto as easily as other things. That said, the story is intriguing enough and there are enough side plots and missions which are actually really entertaining, thanks to the great vocal performances both for your companions and regular NPCs. The combat, once I actually got the hang of it, was also pretty fun as you could take down enemies in a variety of different ways, and then if you manage your skills properly, there is a way to talk your way out of the final boss fight like I did, and getting to just experiment with all those different varieties of how to customize your character was a very fun way to do the gameplay. So overall, this was a lot better than I honestly expected it to be, but not quite good enough for the top 7. And that said, number 7 is probably a bit controversial, but what I have for it is Resident Evil 2. I never played the original Resident Evil 2 game on the PlayStation, so I had very little knowledge of what to expect with this going into it. But the gameplay is fun, I will acknowledge that. And learning the layout of the 3 main areas is exciting, as is not having zombies necessarily stay dead after bullets to the head. Having Mr. X follow you throughout the police station and other areas of the game is also very terrifying at times because of how unstoppable he is until the final encounter. Really what keeps this game from going higher up on this list is the story. By itself, it's fine. The 2 stories of Leon and Claire differ enough to stay interesting, but I would have loved to see a genuine crossover where they fought different enemies and went to different places, and we got to see the results of those actions shown in the other characters' respective playthroughs. So as a result, after playing through essentially the same story 4 times to get through both the A and B runs for both characters, the story did get a bit dull because of how non-changing it was. Despite that, I do still hold Resident Evil 2 as a pretty great game this year, and I cannot deny that it's one of the better games of the year, thus its placement on this list. I just wish it did a little bit more with its story to make it stand out all the more. The last of the bottom 5 goes to A Plague Tale: Innocence. This is a touching brother-sister adventure set in a plague-ridden country. Plague Tale immediately had me hooked by its story and did not disappoint, despite getting a little bit weird at times. The gameplay was a delight too, as supply management was just as important as it is in Resident Evil 2, and having to solve puzzles in the environment so as to not get devoured by rats invoked more suspenseful terror in me than anything else this year. It was a joy to play and one that I love to see a sequel to sometime down the line, amongst everything else on this list. And now we hit the top 5, starting with Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. This is the first good single-player Star Wars game in quite some time, and Fallen Order focuses on Cal Kestis and his quest to rebuild the Jedi Order. The story aside, the gameplay and graphics are the main draw here. Each planet is immersed in detail and feels extremely unique to navigate, while the navigation itself has pieces of both Tomb Raider and Uncharted to guide its way. Combat is taken from Software's Dark Souls style, in which is very methodical, and if you try to hack your way through enemies, you're not going to get too far. Trust me, I tried. It's unique and just what the franchise really did need right now. I only wish that there was some sort of fast travel system, even if it was only in the post-game. And collectibles don't really have any real value, aside from just some lightsaber customization changes, which don't really affect the combat in any unique or satisfying way. But the game is still a blast to play regardless, and I can only hope we'll see more soon. Coming in at number 4 is Control. What I really loved about this game was the gameplay. As you explore more of the oldest house, Jessie, our main protagonist, learns more abilities and her superpowers are a joy to use. Combat is quick and can feel frustrating at times. I either walked or dashed off a ledge countless times early on. But once I mastered the abilities, it was so satisfying to be able to just destroy waves of enemies just with a flick of my wrist almost. The story is also very good, as Jessie is forced to deal with an invasion of the Hiss in this building while trying to find her lost brother. It works, but it's not quite as compelling as I thought it maybe could have been. The layout of the oldest house is also worth noting, as its architecture is stunning to walk through and has some of the more unique designs that I've seen in a game this year. I'd love to see Jessie's story continued to some extent and see what other adventures this house has for her in a future installment. And now we come to the top 3, which was a very tough choice, at least for the number 3 and number 2 spot for me. And at number 3 is Code Vein. The best way to describe this game, I think, would be just anime Dark Souls, because that is basically what it looks like and what it plays like. I've never been huge into the Dark Souls, Bloodborne, From Software-esque games, just based on the gameplay. So when I started to hear about Code Vein, I was hesitantly intrigued by it. Turns out it takes that formula and makes it much more accessible to the average gamer. The biggest gameplay change, which made it just work great, was the option to have an AI partner to help with combat. This was a massive relief early on and helped me just get further and further immersed into the game world, not having to solely rely on myself to take down enemies and bosses. It's even something that I continue to use even when I repeatedly went through the story in New Game Plus, because of how useful the AI was and how much more accessible it just made the game overall. And even though it does make boss fights much more manageable, I still lost to most of them, at least a fair amount of times, even with a partner by my side. So for me, who's not very well versed or good at the Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Neo, Sekiro games, this game still provided plenty of challenge for me personally. The graphics also have a style which reminds me of the Tales franchise, and the story is ripe with lore and backstory for all of our main characters. And I really loved that the lore and the backstory for the characters was not just thrown directly into the main narrative. You can really just skip over the entirety of it unless you go looking for it, or until you have to basically dive into it if you choose to. And I really liked that they had that option and helped the pacing to stay very quick and fast and enjoyable, and did not get bogged down with unnecessary backstory if that wasn't what you were interested in. When I started this game, I really did not think I would end up getting super far into it, just because of my history with similar styles of games like this. And by the end of it, it just ended up being one of my favorite games of the year, and one that I just enjoyed so much as a result, just based on how much fun it was overall gameplay wise, and get to experiment with different blood codes and how much you can customize your character. And it just became one of my favorites of the year, honestly, and I really, really liked it. My number 2 game of 2019 goes to Days Gone. What really ultimately put this game above Code Vein for me is its story. It is a long story. The game is like 40 some hours, I think. And it does start off kind of slow as you're getting immersed into the world of Days Gone, Deacon St. John, and everything that kind of sets up this world. But over the many hours that I spent exploring this world and its many characters, it just made me love the game by the end. Code Vein was great, but its story just didn't really grip me as Days Gone does. Deacon St. John is an incredibly interesting protagonist to see fleshed out, and the many, many different side plots and places this game goes made it one I could not put down at times. The world is vast, and traversing it on a motorcycle of all things makes it all the more inviting, despite the murderous creatures inhabiting it who will chase you down if you get their attention, and it's terrifying at times. The gameplay is also a blast to play, combining stealth-like action, kind of like The Last of Us, but also having this third-person shooting combat, which felt very similar to Horizon Zero Dawn at times. And then towards the end, finally being able to take down a horde of freakers is oh so satisfying after running from them in terror many more times than once. I do honestly think this is one of the more underrated games on the PS4 and of this year, and it was one of the biggest surprises of this year for me just because of how low my expectations were for it going in. I didn't really expect a lot from this. I wasn't hugely impressed by the gameplay trailers that I've seen, but once I started to just dive into it, get a couple hours into its gameplay and its lore and its story and combat and everything, I really became gripped by it and intrigued by it and immersed in it, and it ended up being one of my favorite games of the year, like Code Vein, like Control, and it's one that I love to see a sequel to, and just see where Deacon St. John's journey goes from here. Now, I have to point out, this is ultimately my list of favorite games of 2019 based on what I have deemed to be the best games of the year. So while there are games of better quality on this list, no other game brought me as much joy and satisfaction as my time with Kingdom Hearts 3. This game serves as the conclusion to the Darkseeker saga. KH3 sees Sora recruit the 7 Guardians of Light to battle against Xehanort and the organization. The story is fun and has lots of Easter eggs and fun, satisfying moments for myself and other Kingdom Hearts fans who have been following the series since 2002. The graphics have a massive update to them, and the environments of Sora and his companions and the worlds that they traverse look so detailed and so true to their Disney origins that it's just immensely impressive, and just seeing how much more you can really travel around these worlds compared to the last few games that didn't really have open cities or NPCs or anything like that. It shows how far the series has come since the first and second games. The gameplay is also tweaked, because it stays true to the original formula at its basis. It's basically you have a keyblade or a sword, and you're basically hacking away at enemies. But it has so many different ways to do that, and it has such variety to the combat with the keyblade forms and transformations. You can customize those and use them as whatever fits your unique gameplay style. And I just really, really liked that feature to it, and made combat much more interesting, much more enjoyable as a result. I ultimately took a week off of my job when this game came out to just fully commit to it and play through it, because I wanted to just play this as much as possible initially. And it did not disappoint me in hardly any aspect. Is it a perfect game? No. Not. I have my written review, it's in the description if you want to check out my full thoughts on it, but it's a damn fun game, and no other game this year gave me the same level of enjoyment and satisfaction and excitement, and brought me to like excited tears when the opening cutscene started than this game did. And so, yeah, Kingdom Hearts 3, easily my game of the year. Just because, like I said, it's the one that brought me the most joy of anything else this year. So, those are my picks for the best games of 2019. But my guess is that you had different choices and favorites, so be sure to list them down in the comments down below. 2019 was pretty good for gaming, but next year might be even better with Doom Eternal, Cyberpunk 2077, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and of course, The Last of Us Part 2. All in just the first half of the year, so we don't even know what's coming in the second half of the year after E3 announcements. So it could be a really great year overall. We'll see what happens. Make sure to like, subscribe, and also hit that notification bell so you know when my next video is going to come out. I'll be doing lists for my top 10 movies, anime, bunch of stuff coming in the next few weeks, along with the regular movie reviews. So make sure to subscribe if you want to check those out. Overall, guys, thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.